you can't force a new product introduction.
Some SKUs should be built with the intention in mind of them working on ads, and some should be built with the intention in mind of working on retention to improve LTV.
You've got to understand your customer and what they want to and would buy from your brand.
You don't have to always launch new stuff everywhere all at once.
Dylan, when and where to launch products? That is the question today that we are going to answer.
Everywhere and all at once. Just more.
Everywhere and all at once.
Boom.
Yeah, man, I'm excited about this one because new product launch is a very common decision point that brands come to us with, like, hey, I really want to launch this new product. Should I do it? When should I do it? And I think the when and where, right? Like not just when, but like what channels and things of that nature do you launch this product in? It's just something that comes up all the time, and I'm excited for the advice that we're going to be able to give our audience today. So to start, do you have like any sort of and maybe you don't have this, maybe I'm just like making this up, but like, are there some rough, even if they're wide, are there some rough like revenue bands where like it starts to make sense to think harder about product launch than others?
Yeah. So if you have like a relatively big TAM and you're selling in the States, I would say that it's rare that you can't get to 10 million with like one core offer. There are some niche products where maybe, but like that's pretty small. You're probably in a pretty niche category. I think that like focusing on one core offer through to 8 figures is generally wise. But then you have to start developing the new product muscle if you want to get to the multi 8 figures or 9. There are exceptions where if you just have a product with a huge TAM, you can just rip. But that is not the majority of brands. Normally,
sure.
Once you start getting into the $10 to $50 million range, the way you go from 10 to 20, 20 to 30, so on and so forth, you start multiplying products or categories. I think what you don't want to do is get to 500K and start spending all your resources doing those net new products. Unless, of course, your first product doesn't actually really make profit, in which case you maybe don't have any choice because you're kind of still in like new business mode.
Yeah.
Once you start getting into the 8 figures, that's when you really have to start taking these things seriously because that's how you kind of keep getting bigger. There's some exceptions as well. If you're a replenishable product, you maybe don't need to do it as soon, but normally those businesses have a lot of free cash flow. So you maybe want to start doing it sooner anyways, because what you don't want to have happen is get to a place in your growth where you can't grow anymore because the offer is not scaling and you need to launch new products. And that takes many months or years to procure. So in those scenarios, you want to almost do it before you have to do it. So another fair statement would be even in the high 7 figures, if cash flow permits and you don't have a huge TAM, maybe it's worth it then as well.
Okay, so I'm going to shake things up a little bit. We have a mutual client that I've been working with them for almost 4 years. I think they came to me when they were doing about like 2 million a year in revenue. And we just basically broke through 8 figures in 2025. And they have always needed new product drops from day one because they're an apparel brand. And they've largely been operating on, generally speaking, break even on new customers, make all of your contribution margin on returning customers, not a CAC to LTV play like a supplements or a consumables brand, but more of like these people are coming back 12 months later, 18 months later, they're rebuying every year, every season, right? Walk me through how the new product launch strategy is different for that kind of high SKU count apparel brand and why they might need to be launching products continuously from day one.
Yeah, in those situations, if all the money is made on retention and you don't have a replenishable product, you have to have other stuff to sell people. And then clothing is just very personal. So if you want to have something that someone wants to buy, an example would be like if I'm selling like skincare products and I sell you like the best face cream, there's probably going to be a lot of people who are going to be willing to try your cleanser or your shampoo or your this or your that. Like it's adjacent enough.
Yeah.
Whereas if I sell you a t-shirt that has a cool design on it, and you have four other t-shirts with a cool design. Well, I may not like the other four designs. So you may have to have just more options for someone to buy to actually facilitate that LTV. So you're right, there are exceptions, but those exceptions are clothing is a great one. Like you have to have higher new product volume velocity for a clothing and apparel brand. The danger with clothing is having overstock and getting stuff stuck in your balance sheet. Like, and you, when you're starting out, you don't have as much cash traditionally. So you have to be very diligent about not overbuying and having a liquidation strategy. But the reason why these brands have to do that is just because in order to get LTV, you may need to have dozens or hundreds of SKUs. And they have to multiply sizes and variants and
For
fillers on
sure.
top of it. Oh, there's so many SKUs to pay for. But that is traditionally how you actually grow those businesses, because most clothing and apparel brands, unless you're in luxury, the first order margins are usually not great.
Yeah. Are there any, I'm just curious, I actually don't know the answer to this question. Are there other, besides apparel, are there any other like product categories that you've seen that you have to have a similar type strategy of like you're basically breaking even or turning a very small profit on new customers, and you're consistently launching new products to drive returning customer contribution margin?
Sometimes like cheaper home goods.
Mm.
Like basically any high SKU count store with a low AOV.
Got
The
it.
answer to that is low. If you're a high SKU count store, low AOV and low LTV. Like if you don't have very expensive items, CAC is CAC. You're gonna cap out on that at some point. You have to have more stuff to sell people to get AOV to go up. So like a lot of home goods businesses have a lot of items. Um, but yeah, it's not the like most brands we come across other than clothing and apparel don't fit into the bucket you just described. That's definitely an exception.
And here is the, just to say it another way, you tell me if you agree with this. The This particular apparel brand we're talking about, and other apparel brands that I've worked with before, they actually are high LTV, but they're not high LTV velocity. They don't have high LTV by month 3 to 6. It's this really long tail, right? And it's like over the course of many years that you generate this LTV from a customer. So I do want to just differentiate that, like the LTV to CAC game we're always talking about, that requires sufficient LTV by month 6-ish. 3 to 6 is what I always like to say. These apparel brands actually do have very healthy LTV, but it can take over a year. It's oftentimes like, this brand's been around for 4 years. I think of it like layers of multi years of LTV, like stacking on top of each other. But the founder, one of the founders, who she's just like a product development like wizard, she knows she's always got to be on that game. And she knows we've had months where she's like, man, we're just not going to do that well this month because I messed up the product drop calendar, and like the stuff's not going to get here on time. And she just already knows. The important thing is when it comes to like when she's launching products, she knows what game she's playing. She knows where product launches fit in the game. So I'm curious, like when we talk about, you say like generally speaking, a core product, an offer can get a brand to 10 million D2C. Where are some of the common kind of checkpoints or milestones where you see like, hey, it may be time to start thinking about the next product here?
I think it all comes down to how much more runway you have left in your CAC. So CAC increase is not linear, and forecasting how CAC increases over time is hard, but you should at least try. And if you're seeing at the current trajectory that you're going to start capping out on volume in, say, let's say you expect that you're going to cap out in 2 years. You're going to have scalability issues in roughly 2 years, arbitrarily. And you think it's going to take 6 to 12 months to procure a new product. And you also have a reasonable expectation that every product you launch not necessarily works. You may have to launch 10 or 12 to actually like find a new winner, sometimes even more, depending on your category. Well, you have to kind of back out where my business might stop growing if I don't figure something out. Product's not the only lever, but in some cases it might be your best one. So you almost have to kind of expect when you're going to start having CAC issues before it
Mm-hmm.
happens, and make sure you have the time and the volume of net new attempts to find new winners. I'd say that is how I would think of it. Um, there's other options. There's offer, there's markets, there's channels, there's all these other things that you can try to do to offset that impending issue that may occur. But I think purely from that new product, that's how I would think about it.
So, in my experience, I don't want to talk about LTV to CAC brands right now, like consumable brands. I want to talk about new customer dominant brands. And we're going to remove, like, we're not talking about apparel, high SKU count. We're talking about hero product, durable good, right? Whatever product category it's in. Look, I've seen a lot of brands struggle that are in that that are playing this kind of game. I've seen them struggle with actually being able to sufficiently launch new products that are profitable at the next incremental dollars of ad spend. And it's largely because they haven't thought through a natural extension of their product line that is like it's an organic additional purchase from their customer base. They come up with this adjacent product and it's like, it's not really something that someone would naturally repurchase from this particular brand. So let me give you two different examples of new customer dominant brands and how the new product launch strategy is quite a bit different for them. So let's go with Guardian Bikes, right? Which I bring this up a lot because I helped start and scale that brand. New customer dominant, like if you think about a bike and it's a high quality, it's like the best kids bikes direct to your door, right? LTV is like got a really, really long tail to it, right? Like you're not getting people repurchasing bikes every 3 to 6 months. Actually, usually people are repurchasing bikes every 1 to 2 years, oftentimes closer to 2 years. Furthermore, because these are kids bikes, usually they're handing down this high quality bike to their younger kids. So they're just buying an additional one for, say, like, the oldest who keeps getting older and bigger. New product launches, we started right in the middle, right, of bike sizes when we looked at the distribution of like ages of kids. Then what we started doing was going down age and up age. And so over the course of several years, we went from these two SKUs that were right in the middle and where like most of the demand was. And then we started offering smaller bikes and ending at the balance bike. And then we started going bigger and ending at adult bike. That actually is a completely different strategy because then a brand that has a durable, let's say, beauty device, where like there is no reason to buy a different size or a different color or a different version of it. It does what it does. Whereas a kid's bike, a kid does eventually outgrow that and they need to buy a bigger size. And so although it's not a high LTV brand in terms of like 3 to 6 months of LTV after acquiring a customer, Guardian has built a higher LTV new customer dominant brand. It still needs to turn a profit on new customers. Let me be clear about that. But you can graduate up the product line and it's natural, right? You really need to think about that if you're a new customer dominant brand, because just going and randomly, it feels random to me as their CFO, randomly launching a new product that just doesn't have a natural, it's just not natural to get your existing customer to go buy that product next. It's actually almost like you're starting a brand new brand and trying to sell it into this existing customer base. Do you see this problem as well? And do you have like any advice about it?
Yeah, so I've seen a few interesting things here. So picking what you sell next is obviously like the name of the game. It's the big question. Sometimes you have to actually go a little bit further from the current product that you sell to actually find a product that will work on ads. But the risk in doing so is that if you're trying to actually build a brand that has durability, at some point you have to build an ecosystem of products and offers that all speak to the same person so you can actually build that following. I've seen some people who I would say are the strongest net new product pickers for finding winners on Facebook occasionally end up with these like brands that are in very different categories within one brand that all maybe work for some time on Facebook or TikTok or whatever channel. But the issue is yes, those products have a unique ability to work well on ads, But at some point, you have to close the loop and actually build an ecosystem of products so you can build that referral over time, that organic revenue over time, and build that durability over time. And there's a time and a place when you want to go and launch an acquisition SKU, and there's a time and a place when you want to launch a retention SKU. What I mean by those two statements are some SKUs should be built with the intention in mind of them working on ads, and some should be built with the intention in mind of working on retention to improve LTV. Sometimes you launch one thinking it's going to be the other and it surprises you. It's not always going to be like you put it in those buckets. You want to sometimes be open to either, but it is a balance between finding the adjacent thing, the slightly adjacent thing, or the completely different category.
Yeah.
And being mindful of what that may mean for your brand and business over the long term.
You really got to understand your customer, man. I know I've said that before, and I'm not trying to like sound like Captain Obvious over here, but like you can't force a new product introduction. That's a big mistake I see a lot. You cannot force a new product introduction. You've got to understand your customer and what they want to and would buy from your brand. So just be mindful of that. But what you were just saying, Dylan, is a really great segue into where to launch new products, because you started talking about, acquisition SKUs versus retention SKUs. So walk us through kind of your checklist of things to think about when it comes to like, where do you launch a new product?
For sure. So I think a lot of it again comes back down to the objective as to why you bought the product in the first place. An example may be if I'm making if I want to be risk averse, I'm making a small PO on something new, but I think it's an acquisition product. Do I even want to launch it on email, or do I want to save the finite SKUs I have, the finite inventory I have to test on ads? On the flip side, did I launch it purposefully to see if it would have a good take rate for my active customer base? I'm going to do it on email. That's like one simple thing that I see get missed a lot, where a brand founder kind of is just excited and wants to promote it everywhere. And if you have enough inventory, by all means, go and do that if you can. But often new inventory orders have low volume amounts, and you want to be mindful about where you launch it initially, and you can always add it to the other channels later. The other thing to consider is like if you're an omni-channel brand, Amazon, DTC, do you launch both at the same time? Again, if you have a finite amount, put it on the channel that you think is going to get you the best return on invested capital into that inventory, or serve the business objective long term because you think it might work on Amazon for this reason, or you think it may work on D2C for this reason, or for a wholesale for that reason. You don't have to always launch new stuff everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can, and sometimes that's the optimal strategy. But usually that's for SKUs that are categorically similar to what you've sold before. So you have an abundant amount of data that you know it's going to crush, or have a high conviction that it's going to do well.
Yeah, we were just talking about on the episode before this SKU-level objectives or SKU-level investment thesis, right? And so I'll just reiterate this for those of you who haven't listened to episode 44. When you're launching a product, you need to have your thesis thought out and documented. We're going to launch this SKU because it's going to drive more acquisition or drive more retention or raise our gross margin dollars per new customer order by $4, which thus allows us to increase our CAC by that much by scaling ad spend. You need to ask yourself, you need to plan ahead. I'm launching this product for this strategic reason. That's how you think like a finance guy. That's how you think like an investor. Even if you turn out to be wrong, you need to define that. The other thing that I was thinking of as you were talking, I'm really curious for your take on this. I've seen a lot of failed accessories product launches, and here's where I usually see them fail. Like one, the brands think that those accessories and kind of like add-ons they're going to be really successful in selling them to existing customers who bought the flagship product, and it just flops. It's just, they sell some, but like it's just such low LTV that like it barely makes a difference, and you got to ask yourself, like, was the juice worth the squeeze? The other one is we're going to try to upsell these accessories kind of like as a bundle on the front end to add some gross margin dollars to our new customer orders to ultimately like pump up the ability to scale CAC a bit. what's your take? Like, do you see these things work out well, not well, specifically around like trying to add on accessories and build in a little bit of extra AOV into orders?
Yeah. So of all the bets to make, maybe it's not a bad one. I just think the upside expectation has to be managed.
Yeah.
If you sell something for $300 and the add-on is $15, if you get 8% of people to buy that add-on, how many gross margin dollars per order on average did you actually just add in
Yeah.
relation to CAC?
60
A,
cents.
a sliver or something, right?
Yeah.
So like that is fundamentally the issue with accessories is that you are because it's an expensive thing, the CAC is probably high. So like in relation to CAC, how much does it actually unlock? Now,
Well, and then really quick,
where
you got to measure that against the inventory investment, right? To stock that stuff. And it's like, is there even a positive IRR on that move? You know, a lot of times, no, I don't think.
I like really expensive cross sells and upsells because and this can be the accessory. If the accessory you're selling is expensive, ideally more expensive than the main thing. And like
Mm.
there's very few instances where this is true. So like for most categories it doesn't make sense. But I know that I'm probably going to get a small percentage of people to convert. So if I wanted to meaningfully change the number, I want it to be expensive. So for most brands, that's just not practical because the accessory doesn't make sense to be more expensive than the main thing. And maybe accessory in this case is like the wrong thing or the wrong word to use. Maybe it's almost like a complementary product.
Yeah.
Like in general, the take rate for a lot of these things will be low. So for it to matter, it has to be expensive. That's why I think a lot of brand founders frequently try to go up in price over time for the net new things they launch because it often has a higher chance of meaningfully moving the needle for that active customer base. But then
Totally.
sometimes it also gives you more CAC dollars as well. So broadly speaking, I've seen it do okay, but more often than not, it almost just becomes like, again, like you can do it, but don't make it your main bet for the year. You know, like there's
Yeah, I totally agree.
gotta take bigger swings.
Totally agree. And look, I'll give you a Guardian Bikes example really fast of like how we tested this. And I think this was actually a smart move. I don't think every brand can pull this off, but for bikes specifically, we were able to find a distributor that could white label things like bottles and bells and like, you know, helmets and baskets and things like that. If you can set up a situation where someone can drop ship that stuff as it gets ordered, so you don't take on the inventory risk, you can test it without taking on the inventory risk, right? And actually going placing a bet and buying the inventory. Then if you get some incremental dollars, right, incremental gross margin dollars on you know those successfully being added to cart, great. There's no inventory risk to offset kind of like the IRR. But if you don't have the ability to do that, I just don't usually see the juice being worth the squeeze. And oftentimes it ends up being a negative cash flow endeavor, even if it's slightly accretive to your profitability.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, like this is maybe not the best example, but like let's say I was selling like I don't know, like a gold bracelet and it's a couple like $100. I happily try to also sell a $1,000 one with or $2,000 one with diamonds at somewhere, and then most people will still buy the gold one, but there's a variant option to buy the special accessorized or exclusive offer. Those types of funnels generally have a decent payoff because assuming that the take rate is, you know, even if it's only a couple of percent, because the dollar value is so much higher, it can actually blend up the average to be meaningful.
mm,
So maybe not the best example because maybe one would not consider that to be a true accessory as much as another variant. But that thought process, I think, will generally be more meaningful than selling cheaper accessories.
awesome, man. What are your final thoughts on when and where to launch products?
Ooh, final thoughts on when and where to launch products. I've said this so many times and it's maybe not completely correlated, but just generally speaking for new products, be careful with not over ordering.
Mm,
And if you are going to make a big bet, just make sure you manage the risk on it. Not exactly about when and where, but I think anytime I talk about inventory, it's just the thing I see the most, the one of the things I see most frequently done wrong. So that's my final
totally.
take. How about you?
Well, yeah, you stole mine, but that's okay because it must be true. But no, I mean, I'll re it. Yeah, I'll reiterate. think about new product launches with your investor hat on. What's the SKU objective? And maybe more specifically, what's your investment thesis? What metrics are launching this SKU going to drive? And even estimate them. I think it's going to increase new customer AOV by $3 and new customer gross margin dollars per order by $1.50. Ask yourself that, define it, and then measure it, because if it's not, then you can objectively ask yourself, should we have done this, and should we potentially change our strategy here? So I think if you do what Dylan just said and what I just talked about, I think you're going to be in much better shape than most brands with launching new products. So anyways, that's episode 45, and that's a wrap.